Harmon will probably try to squib it, and he does. Ball comes loose, and the Bears have to get out of bounds. Rogers along the sideline, another one. They're still in deep trouble at midfield. They tried to do a couple of... The ball is still loose as they get it to Rogers. They give it back now to the 30. They're down to the 20. Oh, the band is out on the field. He's going to go into the end zone. He's got it into the end. The Bears! The Bears have won! The Bears have won! Oh, my God! The most amazing, sensational, dramatic, heart-rending, exciting, thrilling finish in the history of college football.
You tell the whole damn world this is Bear territory. Welcome to Tell the Whole Damn World. We're the podcast that celebrates all things Cal and the prominent people associated with UC Berkeley, known to many as the center of the universe. We hope to put a smile on your face and help you come away feeling good about your connection to the greatest university on the planet. If you have friends who went to Cal, please tell them all about us. It's Monday, August 25th, 2025. It's the last episode before we officially kick off the Cal football season at Oregon State on Saturday, and it's another great day to be a Bear. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm your host, Reza Serafinejad. If you had to pick one person synonymous with Cal football over the last 50 years, odds are you would think of Joe Starkey, the man who spent nearly his entire career calling Cal football games on the radio. Well, today, as we look forward to the Cal football season, we couldn't be more honored and excited to welcome the living legend to the show. We're going to talk all about his origin story, how he became Cal's radio voice, and reminisce about some of his favorite games. I promise it's going to be a fun trip down memory lane. Before the season begins, I have one final Cal football observation to make. If you want to know why I'm so optimistic and excited about the Cal football season, it comes down to a few basic thoughts. I feel better about the coaching staff we have in place than at any point since the early days of Jeff Tedford. It starts at the top with Ron Rivera as our general manager, and the entire coaching staff is more seasoned and experienced than any I can remember. They made it a priority to emphasize offensive line and quarterback during the offseason, and in my mind, those are the most important positions on the team. It's great to have talented skill players, but at the end of the day, if you don't have a quality offensive line and quarterback, you're not going to have much luck on Saturdays. I expect some great play calls, a sturdy defense, and have every expectation that we will see a lot of wins for our Golden Bears this season. And we all need to practice saying the name of our true freshman starting quarterback, Jaren Kiave Sagupolu-Tele. With that being said, I have a few programming notes to pass along. With our first football game coming at us this Saturday, we are moving to 2 episodes per week. On Mondays, after each Cal football game this season, we will release a special football wrap-up episode with Ahmad and Cal's all-time leading tackler, David Ortega. And on Fridays each week, we will release our featured guest or Cal history episodes. Over the past month, we've had a bunch of featured guest episodes to release, building up to the football season, and took a short break from Cal history. But rest assured, for all of you fans of Leslie Mitchell, that we will get back to releasing Cal history episodes on a regular basis. And I want to thank all of you out there for helping to tell the whole damn world about us. We just recently broke past 200 subscribers on YouTube and have seen a lot more people tuning in. Please help keep that momentum going and tell all your Cal friends about us. Share us on social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn at Tell the Whole Damn World. And you can follow us on X at Win4Cal. That's Win, the number 4 Cal. And you can always find our latest YouTube videos posted directly to our website at tellthewholedamnworld.com. And if you want to help support us, please visit our website to buy our new Tell the Whole Damn World Game Day t-shirts. You can check them out by clicking on the link to our store that you can find when you scroll down to the very bottom of our website at tellthewholedamnworld.com. As you can see here, I think the blue and the white ones turned out pretty darn awesome. All right. Speaking on behalf of all of us here, thank you so much for your support. We appreciate you more than you know. And finally, if you know people living in Richmond, please tell them all about my co-host, Ahmad Anderson, who is running for mayor of Richmond. There is no question he would do wonders for the city of pride and purpose. Hang tight, and I'll be right back with Ahmad, the Hall of Famer who created Bear Territory, and we'll spend some time with Joe Starkey, the legendary broadcaster who will always be very fondly remembered as the voice of the Golden Bears. What a bonanza! I can't imagine that our next guest really needs much of an introduction. Everybody knows Joe Starkey. The man is an absolute legend. He will forever be synonymous with Cal football after serving as the play-by-play man on KGO radio for nearly 50 years. He started his career calling Cal games when Joe Roth was our quarterback in 1975 and didn't hang it up until the end of the 2022 season. For those unable to watch games on TV, Joe has been every Cal fan's best friend, using his distinctive voice to describe the action on the field to paint a picture in our collective mind's eye. Celebrating along with all of us when things went right in a very professional manner, and remaining calm and cool and commiserating with us when things didn't go our way. I'm sure all of us can recall countless wonderful memories of Cal football with Joe's voice echoing in our heads. And I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that he's responsible for the single most incredible radio call in the history of sports, the play. He's received the Chris Schenkel Award from the National Football Foundation for his long and distinguished career broadcasting college football, was voted Best California Play-by-Play Broadcaster by the Associated Press 9 times, and was inducted into the Bay Area Radio Hall of Fame in 2009. And he is the only broadcaster to be inducted into the Cal Athletics Hall of Fame, along with our co-host, Ahmad Anderson. Simply stated, the man is a sports broadcasting icon. We couldn't be more honored to welcome Joe Starkey to the show. Thank you so much for making the time today.
Hey, Cal is part of my life and has been for half a century, and I'm still involved and want to be and continue to be. In fact, I told Ron Rivera the other day, use me any way you want. That's what I'm here for. So we want the Bears to keep it rolling in a very difficult and different situation.
Yeah, that's for sure. The landscape of college football is ever shifting, it seems, on a year-by-year basis. That's for sure. So,
right. So,
but yeah, well, we'll get into that. But it's interesting that you are originally from Chicago. How did you find yourself out here in California?
Well, it's funny. I never thought I'd end up in California, and I love Chicago. All my relatives are still there. My wife's parents' family are there. But what happened was a whole bunch of things came together at once. 1968 was the magic year, right? As a little boy, I'd come out to California with my grandparents, and so I liked it, and it was fun and all that kind of thing. It was before Mickey Mouse, by the way. They didn't have Disneyland first time I came out here. But what happened was I was now in the National Guard in the magic year of 1968, and that was the year of the Martin Luther King assassination. I was in the National Guard, and I had maybe the worst job you could have in the Illinois National Guard, because I was the protection for the general on his Jeep, so that if people were shooting at him, they were going to get me first. So the psychology of that certainly played on my head. It was also the summer of the Mayor Daley riots at the Chicago Convention. We had gone through the worst winter we had in Chicago in my lifetime. And in addition, the company I work for, Borg Warner, made a mistake. They sent me to Southern California for a seminar in winter near Solvang. And so it's February. I've been shot at throughout the fall, Chicago winters. And when I got back, I said, you know what? I'm sorry. I hate to leave the family, but I need to get out of Chicago, at least for a while. So I sent out resumes, and incredibly, Mattel Toys called me and said, "We're coming into Chicago. We'd like to talk to you about becoming a recruiter for Mattel." And they were already into the Barbie doll era and all those kind of things. They're a very successful company. I actually did the interview with Mattel, so help me God. And they said, "Why do you want to leave Chicago?" And I said, "If my clothing doesn't give you an idea, I'd be surprised, because you might notice I'm wearing combat fatigues, and this is an M1 rifle on my shoulder as we meet at the Drake Hotel in Chicago in the middle of summer because of all the things going on." And so that launched me and got me out to the West Coast.
Wow. Well, yeah, I mean, certainly sounds like it was a good move. But those were tumultuous times, to be
You bet.
sure, out there in Chicago. So I could completely understand. I mean, you hear stories from all kinds of people who move out to California. Generally it's about the weather, but it's more than just about the weather with everything that you were dealing with back there in Chicago. So, and as Golden Bear fans, we're all just grateful that you decided to come out here. That's for sure.
Well, I tell you, it's an honor to have you on the show, Joe. You've known me since I was an 18-year-old kid and walking on the team, but I just enjoyed listening to you. I enjoyed, your presence and being in your space and hearing the stories, but I never really did get the full picture until recently, really, about how you got into broadcasting. I mean, here you go now telling me the story, and I've heard it for sure. But the National Guard, being in Chicago, Mayor Daley, Martin Luther King period of time, being shot at, all these things, and bam, like you descended from out of the heavens into broadcasting and you landed with us. How did you get into broadcasting? And then what inspired you really to take that leap and get into the field?
Well, I think one of the things growing up, a friend of mine and I, who went on to become a priest, and I actually was in the seminary for a while and but dropped out, is that we would go to his basement. Chicago was one of the first cities to have all their games televised by the Cubs and Sox. So we could sit in one of our living rooms, turn down the sound, and at 10 or 11 years old, we're calling games, and we're kind of been doing that kind of thing. But I didn't think it as a very serious thing for a long time after that. I didn't really take a run at it until I'd moved to LA. And now, as I said, I'm working for first Mattel Toys. And then I went over to Union Bank, and I decided, you know what? I still got this in the back of my head that I got to at least take a look at this, see if I can do it. So what I would do is I would go to the Forum, and I would tape LA Kings games, and I would go to the campus of USC and watch the USC basketball team, and I would tape those games. And then obviously the Forum was the hockey games. And I just kept practicing and practicing. And in fact, one of the real breaks I got is the ABA existed in the late 60s.
Yes.
Jim Hardy, who was their general manager and had been a star for the Rams, I went up to him one day out of the blue and said, "Mr. Hardy, I'm interested in being a broadcaster. I know you don't have much going on in terms of coverage right now. Would you mind if I sat at the press table at the LA Stars games and taped games, because I'm trying to get into broadcasting?" And he had a great answer. He said, "Hell yes." He said, "If you do that, maybe somebody will think we're actually on the radio." So that's how I started out. I started taping games at the Forum, downtown LA, kept going and going and going. And when I thought that they were good enough to take a run at, I finally went to Jiggs McDonald, who was the Los Angeles Kings announcer for many years, and told him what I was trying to do. And I had a connection that helped. The Union Bank, was actually had cross purposes with the owner of the Forum at that time, Jack Kent Cooke. And so there was a cross management style of the two organizations overlap. The bank supported him and vice versa. And so that gave me the option to go to Kings and Lakers games and tape them. And so I kept doing that and doing that. And then when I got transferred up to the Bay Area, I kept doing it. I went to Oakland Seals hockey games. I went to Warrior games. And in fact, what I also did is I was able to get go to the Giants games at Candlestick, and I could go up there and tape those as well. There's a guy named Sam Spear, who some of you might remember, who was one of my closest friends. We were about the same age, and he and I would practice together at Giants games. We'd
Wow.
sneak into a booth somewhere and call games. Just kept doing that. And finally, I reached a point where I thought maybe I got something going. So I had a business trip in 70 or 71 to go to Arizona on a recruiting trip for the bank, looking at students for jobs at Arizona State and Arizona. But the Cubs were in spring training. So I called Jack Brickhouse, who was a legendary announcer for the Cubs. Mr. Brickhouse, I'm from Chicago. I live out here now. I'm very interested in getting into sportscasting. Can I spend some time with you? He lets me come up to his hotel room. I give him my whole history and all that. And he says, what are you doing the rest of the day? I said, I don't know. I said, maybe I'll go see the Cubs. He said, you're going to see the Cubs. You're coming up with me and you come in the booth.
Wow.
So he invites me up to the booth. And now the thing out of left field that was so incredible. Fourth inning comes along, and Brickhouse, WGN audience in Chicago, says, got a young man here from Chicago, now lives out on the West Coast, thinks he's a sports announcer. Joe, it's your inning. How about that one?
Wowza.
Out of the blue, just cold.
Come on.
Take over. Yeah.
Come on.
So I did an inning. We talked after the game, et cetera, and he was a big help getting me started. So what happened, though, the key to the breakthrough was that the Seals announcer had left before the 72-73 season, and he had gone to Los Angeles to do the Kings hockey. So his name is Roy Story, by the way. Some of the audience might remember him as a Bay Area guy. So anyhow, he left, and they didn't have an announcer for the 72-73 season. So I called KWN Radio in San Jose, asked if I could talk to the station manager, said I'm interested in doing the hockey games. And I, by that time, made a couple of years worth of tapes. They said, well, you need to talk to Charlie Finley. So I created a business trip to Chicago, my hometown, Finley's offices, went to Charlie Finley's office on Michigan Avenue, played him the tape, and he hired me on the spot to do the Seals hockey games. That job lasted 20 minutes because before I left the room, remember, I have an MBA and my specialty is human resources and hiring and firing and all that. And he had a terrible reputation for getting rid of people fast. So I said, Mr. Finley, I could probably help you with your turnover problem too. He took it personal and fired me before I left the building.
Wow.
Man.
I've had the job for about a half hour.
Come on, man.
So I thank God I didn't give up. I went back to the radio station, Keene, San Jose, told them what happened. And they said, you know what? We think we can get you by that. The A's were in the World Series. It's 1972. So he lets me come up to the KWN booth. And Finley is up there as well in Super Box. And he brings my tape to Charlie. And he starts playing it for Charlie Finley. And he says, I think we ought to hire this guy. He said he has no experience, but I like his voice. He obviously knows the game. He said, what do you think, Charlie? He said, wait a minute. Don't tell me it's that son of a bitch banker. That's the exact word he used. Yeah. And he said, yes, it is. He said, okay, I give up. Hire him. So that got me the NHL, and obviously a lot went well after that.
Wow. Well, boy, that guy certainly sounds like he had a bit of a short fuse there, didn't he? But
yeah, well, yeah.
But it's awesome that was what it took, I guess, to get your break and to break into that field, and thank goodness. And so then that explains a lot about how you got into broadcasting. But then how did you land the job specifically to do the Cal broadcasts?
Well, some things happened in the middle. The Seals, after my first year, 72, 73, lost their radio outlet. They had no radio for 73, 74. Again, luck plays such a part in so many of our lives. At the end of that 72, 73 season, we happened to have a game in late, a week to go in the season in Pittsburgh. And the owner of the Pittsburgh Penguins sat down next to where I was broadcasting. He listened to the third period. And after the game, he said, would you be interested in moving to Pittsburgh? We need an announcer for next year. This guy is moving on, doing something else. I said, well, thank you so much, Mr. Potter, but I live in California. My family's out there. That doesn't make sense for me to do that. Well, hello. 3 weeks later, they lose the radio. Keene says they're not going to carry any more hockey. I call the owner back. He says, come on down. So I land in Pittsburgh for a year in a tough situation because my wife and kids were living in Walnut Creek. I sent them to Chicago to live with her parents, and I had 2 little boys, and I spent the winter in Pittsburgh doing hockey before the Seals got back on the radio and I went back out to California. So sometimes you got to be lucky and be in the right place at the right time. By the way, here's your trivia of the day, though. That year I was in Pittsburgh, John Miller is a 23-year-old broadcaster who's trying to get a job somewhere, anywhere. He's on some small TV station in Santa Rosa, and he thinks that's about to end. I said, look, John, I'll tell you what you do. I'm moving to Pittsburgh for the winter. My family's in Chicago. You move into my house, and you spend the winter in my house, no rent, just pay the utilities, and you've got it on me for the entire winter while you figure out what's going to happen to you.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So in February, late February, he calls me one day and says, Joe, they said, thanks so much for what you've done. He said, I've gotten a break, though. I've just been hired to do baseball for a team in Nebraska, a minor league team in Nebraska. So help me God, 24 hours later, he calls back and he said, I hope you're sitting down because I am. He says, Charlie Finley just hired me to do the A's. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's
Full circle.
the progression there. So here we got a full circle thing, as you say. And the next thing you know, I'm able to go back to the Bay Area, continue to do hockey. But I'm now have the opportunity of doing some relief work for KGO. So Monty Stickles is the sports director. And so he's using me to get tape and things like that. And then they have me fill in a few times. And suddenly KGO has the rights to Cal football. And they'd had it at that point for 2 years. The announcer, they felt, was not really a play-by-play guy as much just a sports reporter. And believe it or not, by the way, the color man at that time was Joe Cap. Okay, Joe Cap's the color man. Yes,
Really?
he's the color
Man.
And so the other guy, they said, would you like to do Cal football in 1975? And I said, oh, heck yes. As I didn't see that as a big problem if you're doing hockey because there's some overlap, but only a few weeks really, so not a big problem. So I take the Cal job, and on the first game that I ever worked for Cal football, we played in Colorado. And there was a guy named Don Mitchell, who was the president of San Francisco Federal Savings and Loan Association. On my first trip, we're going to Colorado, first game of the year, charter, after I introduced myself to him. He says, we've had 3 announcers in 4 years. How long are you going to be here? I said, I will be here as long as I want to be. Exactly how it turned out.
Watch out now.
That is a great story.
That is an amazing story. I mean, talk about stories, and as the world turns, if you will, your call of the play. Walk us through what was going through your mind as that was unraveling like a ball of yarn being batted by a big cat, if you will, or a big bear, if you will. And tell us about the impact it's had on your career.
Well, huge to say the least. By the way, my color man for that game was Jan Hutchins, who at that time Channel 5 Sports at that time.
Yes.
And so he was my color man. And ironically, the year I was in Pittsburgh, he was a Pittsburgh sportscaster. So we knew each other a little bit. But anyhow, the play was so bizarre. The only thing that I think the proudest part I have of it is the fact that I didn't quit on the call. There were 3 broadcasts, the Stanford announcer, regional television, and both of those guys, and it's just, I'm not blaming them, they just thought that was the way to do it, is they said this will not count. And they said there are flags on the field. And so they downplayed the play thinking it would not count. And as young as I was as a broadcaster when that happened, I always felt to my core, never give up on a play. You can always apologize afterwards if it doesn't come out the way you think it should. So I kept with it all the way. It was completely zany, obviously. It was hard to follow what was going on. A couple of times, I didn't even mention a couple of the names because it was happening so fast, and there were band members now in the way, and there were other players on the field in the way. And so I just did the best I could. And by the way, there was a guy named Mike Dotterer who was playing for Stanford that day. And Mike, on the last series, when Elway had moved downfield with a 4th and 17 at the 13, he doesn't get that first down. Cal wins, and it's a regular, normal game, right? He does get it. They move downfield. They get the field goal, but they make a huge mistake. He stopped the clock at 8 seconds instead of 4. You stop the clock at 4, there's no more time. You either win it or you don't. There's real no advantage to saving those extra 4 seconds, all right? But they did. They also, after that play, they were so excited about the play, they got a 15-yard penalty for what I always call exuberance, which college officials have tried to do over the years if you don't do too much celebrating. So that moved the ball practically to midfield, set up the position on the field. Dotterer had been in position that could have got them another first down without kicking the field goal, but he cut to the sideline instead of inside. And I've reminded Mike many times over the years, if you cut the right way, nobody know who I was. That play never would have happened. So anyhow, as the play unfolds, I'm just hanging limply trying to stay with it. I'm trying to call the names the best I can. I know I'm sounding like a complete wacko at this point, but I did follow it the best I could all the way into the end zone, and obviously the most sensational play ever in college football. And there's a footnote to it that is so bizarre, it's almost impossible to believe. Kevin Moan's dad was my boss at Union Bank in Los Angeles.
What?
Yes. What are the odds
Come
on that?
on, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? Come on, man.
And now Kevin's got a statue out in front of the stadium, and his dad comes up for some of the events. And a good sideline story also for this one is that many years ago, at one of the events where we were all together, his dad came up to me and said, Joe, he said, when you worked at the bank, I would come by your office on a regular weekday afternoon, and I'd hear a ball game. And I couldn't figure out who's playing at 11 o'clock in the morning somewhere. How could that be on the radio? He said, well, I figured out by the way your life has turned out is that on our time, you were editing your own tapes, practicing to get out of here. And that's true. That's it.
Well, I got to tell you that you talk about Dotterer, and he makes the run and he cuts outside. So my son, he comes in for the Hall of Fame presentation in 2022, and I was getting ready to walk into the stadium because they were doing the lunch or something like that in preparation for that. And I get a call, and on the call is Freddie Williams, John Sullivan, and Richard Rodgers, and they're back east, and they're visiting Richard when they was with the Commanders still, and they're just reaching out to tell me congratulations, blah, 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 and they're telling me to come in to have lunch for this, and I'm like, I got to take this. I can't go in there without taking this call. These are my guys. I wouldn't be here unless it was these guys. And so my son says, hey, Uncle Richard, do you know that if Dad doesn't get up off the ground and reach for Dotterer, and you come over the top and clock him, if you all miss that tackle, not only does he get the first down, he might have scored the touchdown, and all of this is a wrap. And we paused for a moment and said, wait, hold up. And Richard says, Biggie, his son, he said, he told me the same thing. And I sort of ignored him because I just really wasn't paying attention. He said, I just recently watched it and saw that as well. He said, you were scrambling to take off the block. You got blocked, you slipped, and you reached up and grabbed his legs, and I came over on top and clocked him. That was a pivotal moment. I didn't even think about that. But that whole scenario which you broke down, he doesn't run outside. He runs inside. It's a wrap. He runs outside, and I grab him, and Richard clocks him. The world changed because they just lost all composure on what they should do and how they should move forward, and the rest is history, baby.
You got it. Yeah, it's a great story, and I love telling him that. I mention it too whenever I see him. Make him miserable.
Well, I've heard so many stories from, Cal fans who at that time, if they were driving somewhere, weren't able to be at the game themselves, that they just had to pull over on the side of the road, people just getting out like, what just happened? Like, oh my God, like they just, so incredible. So, I mean,
Craziness.
just
It's
always,
great to be part of that, no question.
that's right, for sure. Well, hey, I mean, in addition to the, you've seen so many huge games. I mean, in addition to the big game. But I mean, in your career, are there a few other quote unquote big games that are most memorable to you that you want to call out that you remember?
Oh yeah, yeah. I had to kind of think about this a little bit, but I think that certainly the 2006 game, Marshawn Lynch game. Okay, this is the one where he scores the winning touchdown in overtime, and then goes and gets the cart and drives all around the field.
Yeah.
That was pretty amazing. That one we won in overtime and over Washington, and Marshawn, who hated to be interviewed, by the way, but in my house, and I'm a lot of homes are about Berkeley people. I actually have a small little, I guess, plastic type thing that shows him in the golf cart driving
Yeah.
it around.
Yeah.
The person that has that, But Marshawn was such a character. He wouldn't do interviews after the games. He was that private, and I could not get him to come on. And so here's this story that fits Marshawn Lynch. Years later, my wife and I are coming back from a vacation somewhere, and we're switching planes in Dallas. This may have been 10, 12 years ago. And as we're going through the Dallas airport, here comes Marshawn Lynch. And I walk and stand right out in front of him and said, "Marshawn, how you doing? You remember me?" He starts laughing. He says, "No, I don't." And I say, with a laugh in my voice, "That's because, you son of a bitch, you would never talk to me after a game and do an interview."
Boy. Oh boy.
Great. So that was kind of fun too. Yeah.
Pretty ballsy there, Joe.
Yeah. So we've known each other a long time. After that, I've talked to him over the years. There's no animosity at all. It was just a funny bit.
Yeah. Well, heck, I remember trying to pull him out of the locker room, because that was part of my job just as a volunteer assistant, was to try to get some of the players out of the locker room to talk to the media. And you're right. I mean, Marshawn wanted nothing to do with it whatsoever. And he had a locker next to Justin Forsett, and Justin saw me kind of peeking around, trying to see if Marshawn was around. And Justin finally told me, he said, what you should do is just get a bag of Skittles and just lay a track of Skittles from his locker to the media room and see if he'll follow that. I always remember that.
Hilarious.
All right, here's another one that was a big deal because it really dramatic, I thought, what Bruce Snyder did on October 20th, 1990. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about. First win over UCLA since 1971. And Bruce, who, by the way, should have been the head coach at the Bears for life, but was completely mishandled by an athletic director who didn't have a clue of what he was doing and let him go and wouldn't pay a contract that, by the way, that Dave Maggard had already agreed to. But Bruce loved Cal. He would have spent his life here. I guarantee you he would have. But that's the game. October 20, 1990. They come down through the stands to go on the field, and they've got the place in an uproar by doing that. And they win the game 38-31. And that ended the long horror story against UCLA. That was an unforgettable game.
I remember that I was a student. I was lucky enough to be a student in the student section when that all happened. And I remember we were just like, what's going on? It's like, oh my God, it's the players. They're running out through the student section and coming down those little steps. When we interviewed your color man, Mike Pawlowski, he was talking about how, it's like, those steps are not all that big, and you're in your cleats and you want to make sure you don't trip and fall. And thank goodness none of them hurt themselves coming down those steps.
And was that a great team or what? Pawlowski and the Citrus Bowl and that great win down in Florida. All those things were there to keep this together for years, and they let him walk away. Snyder. It was just ridiculous.
I know. That's a real inflection point, unfortunately. But I mean,
welcome to Cal football.
But I'll tell you,
the
indelible legacy of what Mike Pawlowski and those teams from 1990 and 91 showed was what Cal could be.
Absolutely.
And that was especially coming out of some of those teams in the previous seasons that unfortunately just didn't have as much success, and then they just turned the corner and showed the whole world what they could be. And then to finish ranked number 7 in the country at the end of that 1991 season was amazing.
And of course, Pulaski, as you know, worked with me for more than a decade. And Mike, we've become some close friends. And when he beat Clemson 37-13 down in Florida, I mean, that was one of the great games. Mike was terrific in that game, winning the bowl game. And it was also a big day by Brian Treggs, Russell White. Everybody contributed to really a big bowl win.
That's right. That's right. Well, hey, I got to ask this just because, you're famous for your catchphrase, "What a bonanza." Where does that come from? How did you stumble upon that?
Well, believe it or not, it came from a Cal alum. When I was in LA and working at the bank, Union Bank, one of the guys I got to know there was a guy named Mike Henninger, who was a Cal alum. And he and I first moved to the West Coast. I got season tickets together for USC on Saturday and the Rams on Sunday. So we were always sat together, and those were Mike's phrases. I stole them off from Mike. I mean, he would always say, "What a bonanza," when things are going well and all that. I've given him credit over the years, but that's where it came from. And it just sort of popped out. And it popped out first in hockey. It started in hockey. We get a goal, and I'd yell, "What a bonanza" for the Seals or the Penguins or whatever. So, and Mike and I stay very close in touch. We're still pals to this day.
That is so funny. I mean, boy, talk about a small world and how we're all connected, right? I mean, you're talking about Kevin Mullen's father and now this. I mean, that's really kind of uncanny.
And
And
Joe Cap, the color guy, when
yeah,
you
Joe Cap,
started,
right.
Yeah.
crazy.
Well, hey,
Yeah. And of
one
course,
other
my
thing, and
first
you were
other
just
guy was Monty Stickles,
Yeah.
Stickles was the guy
Yep.
who got me the job and saved the job for me 1977, where my whole life would have been different because the Seals went out of business. I took a job as doing radio and television simulcasts for the Colorado Rockies of the NHL, a team that eventually went out of business and became the New Jersey Devils. But I moved to Colorado, and in 76, when I moved there, KGO let me do the games, commuting back and forth from Denver. In 77, however, and I would do the same thing. Station manager said to me, said, "Joe," he said, "we can't have our broadcaster living 1,000 miles away from the Bay Area. So we're going to
Yeah.
bring somebody new." And in many ways, it was the break of my career because the guy they replaced me with, and I don't have his name and I don't want his name, was so bad that halfway through the season, Monty Stickles, who had worked with me, went to management and said, "Get this guy off the air. He doesn't know football. He is no good at this. And even if you've got to pay the price of having Joe fly back and forth, you need to get him back on these broadcasts." So halfway through the season, the first game I did in 77 was against UCLA, the 5th or 6th game of the year. And I came on the air and said, "Now, after being so rudely interrupted, let's get on with it."
That is awesome.
Yeah. And of course, I ended up moving back to the Bay Area a couple of years later because I could see that the Colorado Rockies were not going to make it, and they didn't. They went to New Jersey. And so KGO had been asking me to come back. Why don't you just come back and work for us and forget about the hockey world for a while? And so I did, and I went back to KGO in 79 and stayed as the sports guy through 2005, and obviously till just 2 years ago did the games on KGO.
Well, hey, in addition to the Cal broadcast, you spent 20 years doing play-by-play for 49er games from 1989 through 2008. And when travel became too much to continue to do for both the 49er games and Cal, you chose to continue doing the Cal games and drop the 49ers. How difficult of a decision was that for you to make?
Well, the opportunity to broadcast the San Francisco 49ers at that point, the power team in the NFL, going to Super Bowls all the time. How could I say no? And they were now on KGO radio. And so I decided I'm going to try to do both for a while. And so I joined the Niners in 87, but I was just the sideline guy at that point. It was Lon Simmons that had the job. And then I got the job in 89 and stayed through 2008 was my last year with the 49ers. So doing both, there was a lot of hassle with that because of time zones and overnight airplanes and all that. So
Yeah.
inevitably, it had to come to an end as much as I loved it. And I thought it was fairly logical to stay with the college game. Fewer games, easier travel, at least in those days when everything was West Coast based. And so it was the right decision, but love being with the 49ers and had the privilege of getting a Super Bowl ring. So, how do you beat that?
There you go. There you
That's
go.
right.
It doesn't get much better than that. But Cal fans, we're so grateful that you chose to stay with us all those additional years. So thank you for that. After all the years of helping to volunteer behind the scenes as a student in 1994, I was fortunate enough to fly with the team up to Eugene, Oregon. And we played Oregon up there at Autzen. And that was the year, I think, that they broke through and made their first Rose Bowl in forever. And they just kind of it was like running into a buzzsaw for the team, unfortunately. But prior to the game, and I'm sure you don't remember this because this is over 31 years ago now, but you and Kevin Renault and I went out to a dinner, and cell phones were so brand new. I was fortunate enough, my parents got me a cell phone, and here we're having dinner, and in the middle of dinner, my phone rings, and it's my mom calling to check on me. And you picked up the phone immediately because you're like, what is this technology? And you picked it up and you started talking about it. And you started going, the most amazing, thrilling, unbelievable finish in the history of college. We all had a little to drink that night, but it was a fun memory.
I got to give you one story that maybe you've heard, maybe you haven't. Okay, this is the Rolling Stones story. All right, so it's like in 1991, and my wife and I take our youngest son to go to Europe on a trip, and we go from the Greek Isles all the way up through Italy, and we go up to Rome after a very hot day in August, and we get to a hotel in Rome. And it's a really warm afternoon. It's called the Cavalieri Hilton in those days. And because it's so hot and we've been driving a long time, my wife and my 9-year-olds say they don't want to go to the pool. They just want to take a nap. So I go down to the pool, sit at the pool, pull out a book. The entire Rolling Stones band and their families join me at the pool, okay, in Rome. So I'm sitting there, and who sits down next to me but Charlie Watts, the drummer. And we start talking. I know who he is, and they're telling me about their tour and all that. He says, Mike, it's really warm here. You want to go in the pool? I said, that's a great idea. Let's go. So he and I go into the shallow end of the pool, just standing, kind of cooling off. And a guy joins us who knows Charlie, Lou Ferrigno, who in those days was known as the Incredible Hulk. Okay, so that's right. We got the Incredible Hulk, we got Charlie Watts, and we got this anonymous guy in the middle. Guy jumps in the pool from the other end, looks the trio over, looks at Lou, looks at Charlie, looks at me, and says, "Aren't you the Cal football announcer?" He had no idea who the other two guys was, but he knew who I was.
Amen, brother.
Love that story.
How about that
So
one?
good. Cal fans are everywhere.
Yeah, for the win. The
Yes.
Cal announcer. Well, look, everybody's got their eyes on the ball, right? And we've got the eyes on the ball as relates to the fall coming up, many different changes. I know you're checking it out. I know, as you talked about before we came on, that you're not missing a beat. You're still checking it out. What do you think about the chances of where we are going to land? And I'll say this to you right now, and I've said it and I'll keep saying it to the Bears come home with a bowl ring very soon. But I know that every team in the country, I don't care what division you're in, is changing every second of the day with NIL. And yet, when you are sitting here in the Bay, you are only feeling the angst, the frustration, sometimes the joy, the pain, the agony of we just lost somebody. We just lost somebody. And yet that's happening everywhere. And quite frankly, some of those players people just did not know anyway, unless like you and I and Reza, we're close to the team. We know what's going on. We hear the noise. And I think at this point, you have to coach folks up. You have to play with what you have. Just like Cortez, you have to burn your boat and go in there to win and say, we're not leaving until we win, or we're going to just die here on the field. And so you're watching it. What is your call? What are you predicting? Tell the world, Joe Starkey, what do you think is going to happen to those Bears?
Well, I think it's an incredibly difficult situation, and one of the problems that both Cal and Stanford have is that I don't think either school is prepared to do what most schools are willing to do, and that's to give tons of dollars to 18-year-olds. Okay? I think that really makes it extra tough for Cal. We've already seen players leave, but you would think, don't you realize you're getting a degree from one of the finest universities in the world? Don't you realize you're already here for 2 or 3 years? Do you really want to change your whole life pattern because you can make a few bucks And who knows, will you make it in the pros, that sort of thing. It's heartbreaking to see how some of these players, I think, that have left for the wrong reasons. But that's where we're facing. And so you just deal with it. It changes the whole way you recruit. You've got to just accept the fact that you've got this group right now and you have to work with them. And the heck with worrying about next year. You don't build from the bottom anymore. You build from what you've got and try to win now, baby. Let's win, baby, as Al Davis would say. So you don't have any other choice. I don't know what else you can do under the new system, which I still to this day don't understand why it was so awful, giving students scholarships, room and board, and an education at great schools. I just don't get it.
Say that again with an exclamation mark. You hit it.
Yeah. So, c'est la vie.
Well, yeah, absolutely, c'est la vie. And, it is what it is. And as the great trainer of Cal football, or Cal athletics, Bob Orr used to say, that's ball. That's
there you
ball.
go.
That's
Yeah.
ball. And so we got to deal with the hand that we've been dealt to us. But, you've given us some amazing stories, and there's many more behind that. And I'm so excited again being a fan. But I've got to ask you the question we always ask folks at this moment in time. What is your Bear territory moment? When did it hit you in the moment in time and you said, this is Bear territory, and you just soaked that in like a nice warm summer day? Tell us what it was for you.
I think I would probably lean on just how everybody treated me the final year and gave me such love and affection, where they were doing these events for me and I would be invited to this and invited to that and do this interview and getting out on the field for the game against UCLA, and and they're putting banners up in the stands and up on the hillside and all that.
Yes.
That's pretty heavy stuff. I never would expect anything like that. And throughout the years, I always felt that the fans were incredibly supportive, and I love spending time with people I didn't even know until they said they were Cal fans and they were somewhere, and we would talk and we would get something going and we'd have visits and all that. It's just that relationship with everybody through the years that made it
Yes,
so
sir.
special. And you get to know people you didn't think you'd ever know, and it works out, and it's pretty cool.
Well, I'll tell you, Joe, one of the most memorable times for me, of course, is my senior year and the time that I played, because you were there every step of the way. But one of the greatest times was that last year where you and I got the award, and you probably can't see the glare, but it's a great tribute to Joe Starkey and
that's
his
a great.
time.
That was unbelievable what they did.
And
That
you
was
and I are probably one of few, other than Mr. Beastman, the Beast himself, to have this tribute. And I have it in my house, and it's placed promptly in the house, so that folks can see and know the story and how you are a great part of how I even came up with the Bear territory. Your voice, your touch, your class, and just the great love you've had for Cal football. I don't think we could love you as much as you've loved us, and I really appreciate it,
It was
brother.
great to have the
I really
career, but that
appreciate it.
one play did put me in a different category. Yeah, there's no doubt about it. It was so amazing that that I would be able to go almost anywhere and people would react to that. I'll give one quick story that even blew me away. There used to be I've gone to a lot of charity golf tournaments over the years. Joe Morgan had one for years. And one day at his tournament out in the East Bay here, he put me with a bunch of guys from Los Angeles. This is maybe 15 years ago. And the four guys, about 4 or 5 holes into the round, one of them come up to me and says, Joe, he said, nice to have you with us. But he said, we're supposed to be a celebrity golf tournament. He said, I got to be honest, I've never heard of you. All right. I said, okay, I'll give you about 5 or 6 words. We'll solve that. The band is out on the field. I took care of it.
Drop the mic. Drop the mic, Joe. Drop the mic, baby.
That's awesome. Well, hey, Joe, I mean, we couldn't be more honored and just appreciative of you making the time. You are such a legend when it comes to all of us Cal fans around here. You will always be so beloved. And I got to give a shout out to my man that who created this T-shirt that we gave to you, and you were kind enough to sign a bunch of them. But Nate Brown, who went high school with me at El Cerrito High, and then was a baseball player on the Cal baseball team. But just another example of just all the countless Cal fans who love you so much. And we gave this to you during the last game that you broadcast there at 2022, and they auctioned that off to help support the baseball team.
Yeah.
You've been so wonderful and kind, and all the years that I've known you, ever since I was a student assistant, just helping to distribute stats behind the scenes, you've always been so gracious and kind. Just, I was awestruck the first time I met you, and thank you so much again for making the time today.
Okay,
Jerry.
well, let's give Ron Rivera all the help we can and get this act going again. Huh?
That's right.
And
That's right. Well, hey, we'll end it the way we always end it and say, "Go Bears!"
All right, go Bears.
go Bears!
What better way to lead into the Cal football season than having a conversation with Joe Starkey? We hope you enjoyed that as much as we did. So many great memories. And I love that he remains so passionate about Cal football. This podcast is entirely a labor of love and a reflection of how much we love our university. Please help grow this podcast by telling the whole damn world about us. As I noted at the top of the show, just tell all your Cal friends to go to tellthewholedamnworld.com. Thank you so much for tuning in. We sincerely appreciate all of you out there listening and watching. See you next Monday. This podcast is about celebrating all things Cal and the prominent people who are passionate about the University of California. Do you feel Cal is the center of the universe? Do you bleed blue and gold? We want you to tell the whole damn world about it. Go Bears!